Welcome back, Geico Outkick Studios. Appreciate all of you hanging out with us. The loathsome Joel Klatt joins us now at Joel Klatt on Twitter. And it was a big weekend. So I went to watch my first college football game in person. I watched Alabama just dismantle Tennessee. But I think Alabama is going to and has been dismantling a lot of football teams this year. And I think there's a lot more that are going to come before all is said and done. But we bring in Joel to talk about the Big Ten returning and more. You were up in Columbus. What was the vibe like for the return of the Big Ten in that game between Nebraska and Ohio State?
Yeah, I mean, listen, they were through the roof excited. You know, Scott Frost was, the Nebraska players, everybody for Ohio State. There's no doubt. All those Zoom calls, they were just like, man, we can't wait to get out there. That being said, you know, I've done now a fair share of my game. I think 7 games I've done, I think, if I'm counting correctly. But this was the first one with 0 fans. You know, I've had a game canceled on me on a Friday, that Baylor-Houston game. But this was the first one with 0 fans. At least even the very first one of the season, Arkansas State versus Kansas State, there was about 11,000 people in there. There was a band there. Same with Oklahoma, Texas, the Red River game. There was about 23,000 people there. So this one was, I thought, the most odd, you know, and to be honest, like it was so disappointing in some respect because there was so much quality play on the field, and in particular for guys that you could tell had dreamed of playing there, were part of a huge recruiting class, like their wide receiver Jackson Smith and Jigba, who made that unbelievable touchdown catch in the back of the end zone. And it's kind of like that play and his career, like he deserved 104,000 people there, you know?
Yeah.
And obviously that's not possible, but it definitely felt odd, Clay. It was the first time this season that I sat back during a couple of commercial breaks and I was like, man, this is a bit of a struggle from an atmosphere standpoint.
We're talking with Joel Klatt. What did you take away from the game on the field itself? Did Ohio State, I know it was the first game of the season, but did Ohio State look to you like one of the 4 best teams in college football?
Oh, without question. And I think that the gap between the top of college football right now and even like the next tier is really wide. And I would say even Notre Dame is more next tier than they are top tier, right? I think that there are 4 unbelievable teams in college football. And I include Georgia, even though they don't have a great quarterback right now, but I include Georgia just because their roster is so complete. And obviously Clemson, Alabama, and then Ohio State is in that category. They're the only 4 teams in the country that have double-digit 5-star recruits on their team. You know, there's 20 5-star recruits overall in the Big Ten Conference. 20, that's it, Clay. 14 of them are on Ohio State's roster. So they're just so much better than everybody else. And Justin Fields, and this is what separates the top 3, Clemson, Alabama, and Ohio State from Georgia, is that those top 3 have legitimate Heisman-level, top-end college football talent at the quarterback position, and Ohio State also has that at the wide receiver spot. Their offensive line was really good. There's not a doubt in my mind that Ohio State is one of the 4 best, and I would say one of the 3 best teams in college football right now.
So you tweeted this out that I thought was really interesting, and I screenshotted it because I was like, I want to bring this up when you come on the show the next time. And I'm scrolling through my phone to find it, and I've got it right here. 5-star recruits on roster by conference. This is a tweet you sent out last week. The SEC has 54. The Big Ten has 20. The ACC has 15. The Pac-12 has 13. The Big 12 has 11. Now, people out there are going to scream, well, J.J. Watt was a 2-star, like people always say. But in general, the more 5 stars you have, the more talented your football team is because there are so few of them. And you broke it down here, and you might have just reiterated it, but Georgia has 16 5 stars. Ohio State has 14. Alabama has 12. And Clemson has 11. The entire Big 12 has 11. And if you eliminate Georgia and Alabama from the roster, and again, Georgia and Alabama have 28 5 stars, the SEC would still, even without Georgia and Alabama having any players at all, and Georgia and Alabama are clearly the most talented, they would still have the highest total of 5 stars in college football, even if you take away all those numbers from Georgia and Alabama. The point on all this is it's really pretty extraordinary how talented those 4 teams are relative to everybody else.
Yeah, and that's why I've been on the record a few different times. I'm growing. I'm changing, Clay. I would say that like my feelings towards the playoff have changed over this first iteration of the playoff. I really do feel like while it's so much fun, the unintended consequences of the playoff are that it's really hurting the sport because the separation of the haves and the have-nots is not happening at 15, 16, 17, and 18. It's happening at 3 and 4, right? Like there's 4 teams that legitimately can win the national championship this year. That's it.
Do you think expanding the playoff to
Notre Dame.
Yeah? Do you think expanding the playoff to 8 would help that because more teams would be able to think that they have a chance to get to the playoff, which might allow? So I'm fascinated by this in general.
Yeah,
because
I don't know, and I'm really wrestling with this, and I sound like some sort of philosopher, which I'm clearly not, but like I'm wrestling with this right now, and I'm thinking about it because on one hand, I am starting to believe deep down that the playoff is bad for college football overall because of what's happening at the top and not happening everywhere else. And that being said, if you grow the playoff, these conferences, because they own the playoff, Clay, will have automatic berths. And you could say like, well, that's great. Well, is it great? Because if you have automatic berths, you automatically nullify the importance of any non-conference game that is ever played. Like it just doesn't matter. It's literally an exhibition. And I don't know if I like that either. So I don't know what the fix is, man. Like I wish I did. I'm going to be thinking really hard about this year, and hopefully I can think and come up with some sort of idea of how we can fix this. Because here's the other part of this that I think needs to be said. In the playoff era, okay, there's been only 3 teams that have made the playoff, just made the playoff, that have had a recruiting ranking of their average of their last 4 years before that playoff appearance of 15 or lower. Does that make sense? Like a national recruiting ranking, average over 4 years, right before they make it, of 15 or lower. That was Oregon the first year, then it was Michigan State, then it was Washington, right? And so it's never happened since then. So I just don't know. Like you talk about expanding the playoff. Yes, that's probably the answer. Because at this point, when it's just the 4 best teams in college football, we already know who they are. We just do, and I think that's frustrating for everybody else because what's the avenue? Like let's say Oklahoma State, okay? Bring up Oklahoma State right now. They had a huge win against Iowa State. If they go undefeated, I would say like they should deserve a spot in the playoff, and they'll probably go to the playoff. But they would be one of those teams that don't average recruiting class in the top 15 over the last 4 years. It's actually like 40th. So in college football, we've turned Oklahoma State into the George Mason of the NCAA tournament. Like, I don't love that. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, I think the other aspect of this is it also a function of how much better recruiting rankings are getting, right?
Yes.
Because some people would say, again, who would get upset when all the attention goes to recruiting rankings, they cite, aberrations. And for people out there who are not paying attention to the overall talent that's coming in, yes, there are 2-star athletes that develop into first-round talent. But
sure,
there are way more 2-stars, right? There are way more 3-stars. There are relatively few 4 and 5 stars, and they are overwhelmingly overrepresented when it comes time to the NFL draft. And I think that's a sign that the recruiting rankings in general in football, because a lot of these guys get into camps now, the tape is better. There's just better analysis. And I think, the 7-on-7s are so much more commonplace. It's a lot easier to rank the talent. And I wonder how much of the talent is the top guys say, well, I want to go somewhere where I can win a championship. And
that's
what
right.
They're recognizing is there's relatively few places that they can do that.
Yeah, and I wonder if NIL, the name, image, and likeness, is going to weed this out. Because let's be honest, right? Like, wouldn't you rather be the big fish in the pond.
Yeah, that's a good argument
when it comes to name, image, and likeness.
For people out there who argue that it's going to make the rich richer, I think it actually creates an opportunity for the poorer schools to actually be able to compete on some levels in a way that they are not now.
Let's just bring it up like this. Would you rather be – so Ohio State, just in their starting 22 players, right, 11 on offense, 11 on defense, 7 of them were recruited as 5-star players. That's insane, right? 7 of them. By the way, LSU has 7 total 5-star players. Ohio State has 7 starters that were 5 stars. Rather than being the 7th 5-star player for Ohio State starting, trying to make money in Columbus on name, image, and likeness, wouldn't you rather be the only 5-star player on, let's say, I don't know, sake of argument, Minnesota in Minneapolis? I think you could probably make $100,000 more being the only 5-star player on Minnesota rather than the 7th starter that's a 5-star player at Ohio State. So,
and not only a school like that,
I mean,
Minnesota is a big Power 5 conference school. I think it's possible. I'm just tossing a school out there. Let's say you're a stud from near Hattiesburg, Mississippi. You can be a player at Alabama, Auburn, Ole Miss, one of those schools, but you're like the 20th best player in their class. Or you can go to Hattiesburg and the local car dealer in Hattiesburg will put you on a billboard and give you $100,000. I think there are a lot of dudes out there that ordinarily would say, oh, I'd rather be the 20th best player in the recruiting class of Alabama or Auburn or Ole Miss or whoever it is. But instead, I'm going to be the number 1 recruit in Southern Miss, and everybody in my small area is going to know me, and I'll have more value there.
I think that's exactly right, and we'll just have to see, because I think what you're also going to see is right now, athletic directors are going to their biggest boosters and begging for money in order to increase the lifestyle of their athletes on campus. They're going to build them, better locker rooms, better services, all this stuff. So they're pouring money into the quality of life of their student athlete. Well, what's going to happen, and I've had off the record conversations with a number of athletic directors who have told me point blank, well, I'm just going to go to my boosters and tell them to just give that money straight to the player on some sort of billboard and not give it to me. And now I just won't have 3 juice bars a day. We'll have 1 juice bar a day. I'm going to cut down my cost by, let's call it $2 million over the course of 12 months. And that $2 million will find its way to my players just in a different avenue. So maybe the rich will get richer. Maybe this will water things down. I think it's a fascinating conversation, though, in particular when we're sitting here and it's the week before Halloween. It's Halloween week, right? Here we are. It's Monday of Halloween. And Clay, we know who's going to play for the national championship. We just do. I don't know how to break this to anybody, but the national championship game is going to be 2 of the best 3 teams in the country. It's either going to be Clemson, Alabama, or Ohio State playing each other in that game.
Is there any, and I think I know the answer based on what you just said, but is there any way that Penn State can upset the Big Ten apple cart of Buckeye expectation on Halloween night in Happy Valley? Ordinarily, you would say, oh, that's going to be a ruckus atmosphere. That's going to be crazy. You never know what happens at night in college football in front of 100,000 fans. Wacky things can occur. But now it's going to be a night game with literally no one in the stands.
Yeah, and the road teams are just at such an advantage. Look at Michigan and the autonomy that they were, and the autonomy that they were able to operate. When I say autonomy on offense, when you can operate with autonomy, that means that you have full disposal of every tool.
No communication issues. Have. It's just
That's
like
right.
a scrimmage.
Cadence, plays, you can change, but you can do whatever you want. It is just like a scrimmage. And how much more advantageous is that for a guy making his first start? And they took advantage, man. They pounded Minnesota, pounded them. And good for them, right? It was good to watch that offensive line play and the running backs play. But so here at the beginning of my studying in the off season, I'm like, that's the one game that I look at and Ohio State's going to have trouble with, because they always have trouble there in the whiteout. Everybody does. Michigan can't beat Penn State in State College. Remember a couple of years ago, it's the game that saved James Franklin's job when they blocked the field goal against Ohio State and beat that talented Buckeye team. Like, that is an incredibly tough environment that is just completely nullified now And Ohio State is sorry, Penn State, but way better than the Nittany Lions, in particular with Journey Brown out, in particular with Micah Parsons out, and in particular when Penn State's coming off a game in which their coach completely botched the game. Like, they should be walking out of Bloomington with a win, and James Franklin botches the game, just period. You can't mismanage a game worse than he did, and now they've got to go play Ohio State, and Ohio State is going to be ready, and I think that they're going to play really well. I just don't see Penn State beating them. Is there a chance? Sure. I mean, there's always a chance. I don't see anybody in the Big Ten playing within 2 scores, Clay, of Ohio State during the course of the year.
And that's going to be fascinating to watch as we go forward. Another big storyline, obviously, in the Big Ten is going to be what exactly happens as, you know, I'm not going to bring you in to be sort of a virologist to try to analyze this thing, but just in a broad concept. Are you concerned about the fact that the Big Ten doesn't really have a safety net to games, right? Like, if players or games have to get postponed or canceled, it's not like the ACC, the Big 12, and the SEC, which were able, knock on wood, so far to kind of adjust games, and so far we haven't had to miss any conference games. Are you concerned about the basically the lack of safety net that exists now for the Big Ten, given that the season has started?
Only in the sense that I don't know what the minimum requirement is going to be for the committee. First of all, I don't think that they will set a minimum, but there certainly will be an internal minimum, you would think.
Yeah.
And, you know, I mean, that's the only – because there's going to be games canceled in the Big Ten, you know, just –
and not postponed, canceled because of the way their schedule is set up.
They can't postpone it. They just can't. There's like you were talking about. There's no wiggle room, and it's going to happen. And they put themselves behind the 8 ball because they wanted to. And again, this is because they canceled. They postponed the season originally, and so when they do bring it back, they have egg on their face. So what do? They throw out some ridiculous 21-day. Right. Auto sit out for a player that has a positive test, which is, to be quite honest with you, pretty ridiculous and a frustration from the coaches and some of the athletic directors that had to give that up in order to get the season. And trust me, I've talked with coaches and athletic directors that have talked with the medical personnel like at the premier institutes in the country that are treating COVID. One of them is in Omaha, by the way, that treated the very first COVID patient in the country. And so they've been at this from the forefront. And, you know, there have been people told, like, listen, the 21-day thing is the dumbest thing of all time. So this is a huge virtue signal, like, hey, we postpone and we're coming back, but we still think it's more dangerous than you think it is. So we're going to have this 21-day mark, which is going to really wreak havoc on their schedule.
And so that still remains to be determined. I've seen you tweeting about this. I heard from a ton of Nebraska fans. The targeting rule in college football remains a mess.
It's egregious.
I think 2 Nebraska players are going to have to miss portions of the second game. What is the fix here? I mean, we've been talking about this, I feel, for like 5 years in college football in particular, and it's still not fixed.
Well, and it's only not fixed because of the loathsome. I mean, you say I'm loathsome.
Yeah.
And sorry to those of you out there that are this person out there, but the loathsome like injury litigators out there. You were a lawyer. You know,
I'm a loathsome person on many levels. Yes, I was a lawyer. I've adopted basically the most hated professions that anybody can be in. I'm in the media. And I am a lawyer. I think the combination of those two makes me basically the vilest human on earth.
Well, and accurately so. So, you know, but the fear of litigation, you know, is so abundant in the administration levels of college football and college athletics, intercollegiate athletics. And so they have to present this idea of safety, this facade of safety, and they are unwilling to backtrack because if they do walk back the targeting rule and create levels to it, and I'll talk about the fix, but if they do walk it back and try to, quote, fix it, it will look to litigators as if they're being soft in the player safety issues. So that's why they're unwilling to do it. And yet they're unwilling also to fix the game clock issue, which is that in college football, we still stop the game clock after first downs like it's Little League football,
yes,
so that the old guys can run the chains and
yes,
set them. It's the dumbest thing of all time. I've done the math, and did you know that a normal team that's not going hyperspeed on offense, a normal team could save about 95 snaps over the course of a season if the game clock would just run after first down. So you wouldn't see it. It wouldn't affect the game whatsoever, but you would reduce the total number of snaps on your football team by about 90 to 95. Teams that go hyper fast would be about 120. Well, guess what that is? That's a full game of contact.
Right.
So you're meaning to tell me that you're out there, the champion of player safety, and you're unwilling to do that small, minute clock change that would actually remove tangible snaps of the football from those players? Give me a break. So we go back to the targeting rule. Here's how I would fix it. I would create 2 levels for it. In the egregious instances where you've got clear intent to use the crown of the helmet as a weapon, in particular high on an opponent, I think that player should and is ejected. In a case where you've got targeting, you've got forcible contact to the head or neck area, but it's in the normal course of football, that should be a 15-yard penalty and the player stays in the game. I'm just trying to retain players' ability to play the sport that they love. We've got now Dante Williams, a really good player for Nebraska, who I thought got thrown out of the game on a really poor call. Mike Pereira agreed with me, and now he's going to have to miss the first half against Wisconsin next week. Cam Taylor-Britt, their corner, thrown out, missing the first half of the Wisconsin game. So 2 of their secondary players, and it's a good secondary, in a year in which Scott Frost is trying to build momentum, in particular when he's trying to build up his recruiting base. And now they've got to play a team in their division that's, some picked them to win, with a quarterback who may be out there or maybe not, because the Big Ten has this 21-day rule out there. But there was 20 of 21 in his first game starting against Illinois last Friday night. It's a mess, dude. It's an absolute mess. I don't understand why these guys in the replay booth won't just take the targeting off. If there's any question whatsoever, just take it off so the kid can play. Like, what are we doing? And ejecting a player from the game should only be held for the egregious instances where there is clear intent to use the crown of the helmet as a weapon.
Joel Klatt, fired up. I appreciate it, my man, and we will talk to you next week.
Love it. See you guys.